Hare Krishna. This is Vijayananda here with our weekly Bhagavad Gita as it is, reading, live stream, commentary, etc., featuring the 1972 Deluxe Macmillan edition. I'm on my mobile hotspot today. Internet has not been really here for me for a few days. And I'm losing my voice, so try to go as fast as I possibly can. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We are reading chapter 6, verse 16 through 19 today. The next verse after this, 20 through 23. Those are, 4 verses all looped together. So that'll be next reading, next live stream. Maybe next week, maybe not. Actually, no. We're going to be 1 week break. I'll be in Busan. Definitely not going to bring my big Gita with me. I could still do a live stream with my phone. I won't have my laptop either. Nope. So unless I do it Saturday morning, no live stream next week. Maybe during the week, though. Anyway, let's get to it. Verse 16. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjun, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much, or does not sleep enough. Very simple, practical, and explicit verse from Sri Krishna. And the next verse is almost identical. It's definitely emphasized again. We are talking about moderation, and that is clearly the foundation and cornerstone of yoga. Now in the purport, Prabhupada gets right into it, talking especially about eating and those who are eating sinfully, eating sinful foods, or the way in which they're eating is sinful, and how dangerous and stupid that is. Dangerous is not the right word. It's really stupid. Prabhupada talks about the mode of ignorance, and that's really the danger. The stupidity is the danger. When you're living in the mode of ignorance, when you're living in darkness, how can you do yoga? How can you be happy? How can you be safe from material pains? Well, basically, you're not. Already by the third sentence in the purport, Prabhupada says, there is no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. And all those foods are in the mode of goodness. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. So these people will only suffer sinful reactions. And even if you're eating vegetarian food, if you're eating just for sense pleasure, or you cook for yourself but you don't offer it to Krishna, well, you're still eating only sin. I feel like maybe he's talking specifically to his disciples and devotees. No, disciples is a better word with this verse, including me. I suffer every day from this. This is the main thing that wants me to come back home to America or some place, some rural farm community where I can actually have good food. I can barely do that with my lifestyle here. It's possible. We'll see. We'll see if I can do it. I'm just surrounded by every single person doing the opposite thing. So overwhelmingly surrounded. My students, my colleagues, strangers, neighbors, every single person does not want to eat sattvic food, period. They just don't eat sattvic food at all. And they definitely don't want to offer it to Krishna. My school provides rice and vegetables and meat. Obviously, I don't eat the meat, but the best I could do is maybe accept the rice, offer it quickly, and then bring to school something prasadam prepared. It takes so much work and time that I haven't been able to find. Between chanting japa, going to judo, it's hard. So I have low bhakti standards while I'm here. And that's why I'm doing this live stream. Hello, hello. Hello, Krishna. Hello, hello. At least I can hang out with you and your song. Yay. My throat still hurts a little bit, but the more I'm talking about Bhagavad Gita stuff, the better I feel. I mean, physically, not just like mentally. Like I actually feel like I'm healing myself just by speaking about this stuff. And then about sleep. Well, once again, Prabhupada is very simple and explicit. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily, period. And once again, if you do more than 6 hours, you're in the mode of ignorance. So that's when you eat too much or sleep too much, you're going to end up in the mode of ignorance pretty quick. Interesting to note is that for fasting, you need to hear the context of it. It's not as explicit, but let's read it. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. That's a really strong statement, though it's nested between two different things. It's strong because Prabhupada doesn't say practice yoga perfectly, which is what he says before. Only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. But here he says, even if you just do a lot of fasting yourself, you can't practice yoga. That's really strong. I think, once again, when in this sentence, just like many others in the Bhagavad Gita, when he says yoga, he means Krishna Bhakti. Krishna Bhakti. He means being literally linked with the Supreme Lord and nothing else. But that's not really how Krishna uses the word yoga in the Gita. First of all, he uses it many different ways. There's not just one way he uses that word yoga. As we'll see in the very next verse, yukta means regulation. So what we're talking about in 16 and 17, moderation, not too much, not too little. And when Krishna defines yoga, it just simply means moderation, not too much, not too little. So that's the foundation. But the ultimate end, and the only reason why we're learning this at all, is because Krishna is God, God is real, and we are a part of him, and without him, we're nothing. I mean, we still have a heartbeat, we still have a body, we still have a family, and so many different things, but our essence and our existence is empty, dark, lost without Krishna. And having Krishna means being in yoga. So Bhaktivedanta Swami, when he says yoga, that's what he means. all the time. Definitely most of the time. I don't know about all the time, but definitely most of the time. And in I think one way how we know is yoga is in italics. If you look in the purport, yoga is mentioned many times, specifically in italics. And I think that's because now, note to self and others, we should keep note. Are there times when Prabhupada talks about yoga not in italics? Well, looking at both of these pages here, I'm not seeing it. So it seems like Srila Prabhupada is really keeping it pure here. And not just pure, I mean very high standard is a better way of looking at it, which I think is appropriate for someone in his position. Because this is the definitive edition of the Bhagavad Gita. It is not to be done again by anyone, pretty much. And Krishna is talking to everyone. Krishna is talking to the beginners, to the advanced, to the atheists. Krishna is talking to everyone, and it seems like Krishna is happy to just get a wink, just get a nod, just get a little bit from anyone who might come across this. But Srila Prabhupada in the purports is really, it seems to me, focusing a lot on devotees, on people who actually want to get Krishna and are serious about that and want the ultimate, exhaustive, final say on the Bhagavad Gita. That's what definitive means. He wants this Bhagavad Gita, and a good reader like myself of the Gita does not want to read another Gita. I have read other editions and translations, and I don't want to do that. And I don't need to. Let me put it that way. I don't need to do that at all because of how Prabhupada has organized this, written it, and so on. And that's really great. Not much else we need to say. We're moving on to 17. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Interesting that the word temperate is used here by Prabhupada. It's the same word Aristotle uses to talk about the same thing. In Aristotle's ethics book, which I call Ethos, it's a virtue. It's the virtue of temperance. And actually, every virtue is about the intermediate condition, not too much, not too little. Like with bravery, the first virtue Aristotle talks about. If you're too brave, you're rash and you jump into a battle and cause trouble. And if you're not brave enough, obviously we all know what that is. That's called cowardice, which is bad. And actually, cowardice is worse than being rash. So the golden mean of bravery is actually is farther away from cowardice. If you can't quite hit exactly the middle, it's better to err on the side of being too rash for bravery. But temperance is the virtue for bodily pleasures, eating, sleeping, drinking, and so on. Now, the word Krishna uses in Sanskrit is yukta, which is not, if you were to literally translate yukta outside of the context of the Bhagavad Gita, you get something else. It depends totally on the context. But Prabhupada translates yukta as regulated. And that word shows up 1, 2, 3 times, and it's regulated each time in the word for word translation. And then yogaha comes, just once. So all this yukta, all this regulation is so that we can finally get yoga. Yoga, being able to practice yoga. So this verse, as I think I mentioned a little bit before, it's almost identical to the one we just read. 17 and 16 are almost identical. The only thing added seems to be that, so in 16, Krishna was like, all right, if you can't do this, you can't do anything. You have no chance of practicing yoga. And now he's saying, if you can do some good moderation, well, forget about this whole yoga stuff. What will you get? You'll get the ability to mitigate all material pains. And that's something we're all looking for right away. Like every reader who's being honest with themselves, reading this right now or listening or following whatever, they're thinking, oh yeah, I wouldn't like to suffer. I actually don't want to be in pain. In the end of the purport, Prabhupada says there is no material leisure or material misery for the Krishna conscious person. And because he says material both times, I think it's indicating that there is spiritual misery that can happen for the devotee and spiritual leisure as well, which I have some experience with. Well, I have experience with all this. Material misery, material leisure, and spiritual misery and spiritual leisure. Spiritual misery is really interesting. That's when you suffer, but you win. Like your suffering is just a roundabout way of bringing you back into yoga, as opposed to material suffering, which just kind of hurts. Just kind of hurts yourself, hurts others. And something we all want to avoid. This is Prabhupada in the purport. A Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, his sleeping is kept to a minimum. And he mentions Srila Rupa Goswami and Thakur Haridas, two great acharyas who would do very, very little sleeping because they were so engaged in bhakti yoga. Yep, there's no material misery for someone who can moderate their work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all bodily activities. Once again, that's called temperance. The best word in English for that, according to Prabhupada and Aristotle, is temperance. Temperance, temperance, temperance. You want to learn more about that? Go buy my book. It's currently $500 on my website. I'm just playing around. No one's buying it anyway, so just playing around. I've given it away for free a bunch of times too, so depends how lucky you are. Okay, let's go on to 18. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. So this verse, out of context, is completely redundant. I mean, how many times have we heard either exactly this or something essentially the same as this in maybe every single chapter so far? We've heard this basic idea. Don't have material desires, discipline your mind, and then you're in yoga and transcendence. Very simple. And it's been said before many times. So why is it significant? It's significant because the timing, because where this verse is coming up. It's coming up just after the two verses we read. And so Krishna is indicating to us and Arjuna that the temperance, the practice of temperance is a means to an end. And that end is getting mental discipline. If you have perfect, and this is, and I think this is what Prabhupada was referring to in that purport of 16, one who artificially abstains from eating and does their own process of fasting cannot practice yoga. Yeah, so if you have perfect temperance, so you have the capability to hone your mind in on something, but you just choose to hone it in on something that isn't Krishna, you've got nothing. You've got no yoga, no transcendence, you've got nothing. So all the temperance in the world is a means to an end. That end is mental discipline and mental activities. So we get, and it's not just about getting a clean or a pure mind, but it's getting to the point where your mind knows its place, where your mind can be directed by the intelligence, where you have a supple mind. That's really the goal. You can't get rid of the mind. And it's, as we've read before, all this Bhagavad Gita blends together for me. I don't know if it was this chapter or the one before it, but the mind can be the greatest friend or the greatest enemy. And we're pretty much stuck with it, no matter what. So if you want it, if your intelligence is not directing your mind, then it's not up to you, really, if it's a friend or an enemy. But if your mind is able to be directed by the intelligence and you simply have a desire for transcendence and yoga, that's what you'll get. And that capability will not be there so long as you're not regulated in bodily physical activities via temperance. And what is a mental activity we can engage ourselves in? Well, that's given directly by Prabhupada. He references Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 4, verse 18 through 20, where we talk about King Ambarisha, who engaged his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord, then the words describing the Lord, and his hands mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, smelling the scents of the lotus flower, tongue tasting the tulsi leaf, and so on. I didn't read it word for word, but you get the idea. It's very simple. Just use your mind on the Lord. There's many different forms of the Lord. And all of your senses can be simply engaged to the Lord. Your eyes, your ears, your body, touch, smell, all of it. And so that's something we can all just do right now, right away. And this is why it's a spiritual science. Like, watch what happens. So if you're not temperate and you say, oh, I'm going to focus on the Lord now. Okay, so you do that for 1 second, and then your mind goes somewhere else, to some material plane. Well, got to work more on that temperance. There's other things as well. There's samskaras and anarthas and so much. But this is the mental activity to do. And even if you're not temperate, you can just start doing this mental activity right away. The transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above descriptions of Ambarisha Maharaj. These prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical, and is typically, this is now me talking, is typically utilized by impersonalist practitioners. It's really just impractical, not just for devotees. I mean, just for Kali Yuga people, it's now become simply impractical. Unless you're living in a very remote area with no devices, which is almost no one, almost everyone in the world now at least has a smartphone. So how can you just turn your mind off? Oh, I'm just going to focus on nothing and blackness and all this stuff. It's just very impractical. Our mind and our senses are constantly looking to attach themselves to something. And you can be a great yogi, transcendentalist, kung fu master, whatever. You can be the greatest human ever and be, and your mind and senses are engaged in stuff. That's totally fine. What is recommended here is to engage those in the Lord. And this yoga is very simple. The more you do the Lord, the more you get the Lord. And you can apply the same principle of yoga to do anything. The more you do basketball, the more you're going to get good at basketball. It's pretty simple. Interesting. Just now, for the first time, I'm looking at the last sentence of the purport, where Prabhupada says, Yukta in the Bhagavad Gita, this is called transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind. Yuktaha. Yeah, that word. So now in this verse, yuktaha means well situated in yoga. This is different from recreation in the previous two verses. So we do yukta, so we may further get yuktaha. Yeah, I really love the Sanskrit stuff here, but we got to keep going here. Verse 19. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. And the purport is also exactly one sentence, so I'll read it right now. A truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. Certainly self-evident kind of verse. I don't know if self-evident is the right word, but it's just an analogy. It's just a simple analogy is given, but it's the perfect analogy, I think. And nothing new is given here. I think that's why the purport is so small. It's just kind of obvious. Like if you read the last three verses and the purports as well, then it's all you get it by now. And it doesn't mean Krishna is wasting space here with this verse or anything. It's just once again another useful educational and rhetorical tool that Krishna uses here, which is called analogy. Exaggeration, Krishna uses a lot. Counterpoints, he uses that a lot. And he has some really great analogies. Here we have a lamp in a windless place, which is obviously we can compare to a lamp in a windy place. So in this analogy, the flame in the lamp, this is like the mind, and then the air and the environment around it is like our physical regulation, our temperance or lack thereof. So when our environment and our physicality is in moderation and temperance, there's no crazy winds, right? So that flame of the lamp is undisturbed. And if the intelligence needs to have a big light, well, it can just turn the oil up higher and then the flame gets bigger and it's still undisturbed and there's just more light. And if the intelligence wants less mind, less light, okay, just turn it down, no problem. But if you don't have regulation, maybe you forgot to close the window, okay, then all the wind comes in, and then, well, maybe you want some more light, some more flame, some more heat, but the wind came and just blew it out. Sorry, too bad. Gotta get up, close the window, get your lighter back, or whatever, just start over again. And I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. It's not just that the mind, when we have temperance, that the mind is just pure. It's just automatically pure. That's not really. It's not necessarily going to happen. But one thing you can taste right away from getting good temperance, good regulation going in your life is your mind starts to become more of a friend for you. And it starts to become easier to take instructions and directions from the intelligence. And intelligence, at least for me, for, logical, academic, philosopher type person, the intelligence is actually the easiest thing to practice and improve. It's one of the easier things for me to work on. Probably, maybe the easiest thing actually of all the different things in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna says we can practice on, or should be aware of, the senses, the mind, the ego, the intelligence. Yeah, I mean, the intelligence has got to be the easiest one for me. Got to be by far the easiest one to be aware of, practice, improve in, whatever. But if your mind is out of control and constantly engaged in sense grat objects and this and that, then your intelligence is like, a supercomputer with no electricity going into it. There's not much that can happen, or worse, that intelligence might be used to do horrible things. So in conclusion, let's all try and get a nice, steady, sattvic flame going in our subtle bodies. That's it, folks. 35 minutes, short as promised. Very good. I will see you all probably within the week. I'm not going to judo this week. Adios. Haribol. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Krishna.